right, everybody good? Fantastic. Asleep again. All right. Hey, we're kicking off a brand new series today. If you have your Bibles, you can go ahead and open to the book of Genesis. That is the very first book in the Bible, if you're not familiar with it. And so go ahead and open up there. And we are talking about, this series is Summer Baggage. And again, today we're kicking this series off. And in this series, we're going to be taking 4 weeks to take a look at 4 questions about things that we, when we go on a journey, we typically pack a bag, right? And so we're gonna take a look at this concept and this idea, and we're gonna look at 4 questions we typically ask when we pack our bags for a journey. And here are the 4 questions. I'm just gonna give you these real quick. Where are you going? That's an important question. You ought to know that before you launch out, probably, maybe. What do I need to pack? Right? I mean, you go through that. You guys, how many of you pack the night before you leave or the day of? How many people start packing like a week ahead of time? See, if I did that, I would leave something. If I packed ahead of time, I would have to unpack it and then repack it and count it off because I'm just telling you, I would not rest well. All right. So question 3 is, what is my baggage weight limit? You guys know that whole deal, right? Going to the airport, you got to put it on the scale. And then lastly, do I have the right bag? That's the 4th question that we'll deal with. And I promise you these will all make sense as we unpack them in the weeks to come. So today we are dealing with the question, where are you going? All right, look at the person sitting next to you and say, hey, where are you going? Like, I ain't going anywhere right now. This guy won't shut up. All right. So summer is here, right? Summer is here, and this is the time of year for most families. We pack our bags and we go on trips and we take our summer vacations. So let's do a quick poll this morning. How many of you already have your summer trip planned? Raise your hand. Go ahead, nice and high. All right, that's good. How many of you that have your trip planned, how many of you are going to the beach? That is your destination. How many of you are beach people? Any mountain people here? Okay, we got some mountain people here. Any lake people? Any people going to the lake? Some of y'all raised your hand on all 3. I'm hanging out with y'all this summer. That's what I'm doing. How many of you, okay, on your destination, how many of you are driving? Raise your hand if you're driving to your destination. All right, anybody flying to your destination? There's like 1 or 2. All right, so just a few flying. How many of you don't fly? Like, I'm not getting on a plane. Anybody? Any of those folks in here? Right? Yeah. Awesome. I love flying. Flying is my preferred way to travel, especially if I have a distance to go. I have family that lives out in Arizona. I'd really rather not have to drive to Arizona. It would be a fun road trip, but most of my vacation would be eaten up in the driving. So I love getting on a plane and knowing that in 3 to 3.5 hours, I will be landing in Arizona instead of having to drive for 3 days, because that is a trip. I've done that before. I've loved flying since I was a kid. The first time I ever flew, I was in middle school, and I flew from Jacksonville, Florida, to my aunt's house in Tucson, Arizona at the time. And I remember when we bought the ticket, I was super excited. I'd never been on a plane before. I'd never even seen a plane up close till that point. And I remember I got to the airport and got on the plane, and I remember, I'm sitting on the plane, and I got the window seat. I had to have, my mom made sure that I got the window seat, and I lifted the little shutter up. And I remember as that thing taxied down the runway and it turned the corner, I said, okay, something's about to happen. This is about to get exciting. And they rev the engine up. Well, I guess they hold the brake. I don't know how that works, but they rev that thing up, and I'm like, okay. And when he let off the brake, my head sunk into the back of the seat, and the faster we went, the bigger my smile got. I was thrilled to death to experience that type of velocity. And then, of course, you look out the window, and suddenly, all of a sudden, the earth starts getting a little smaller in cars, and people start getting a little smaller. But back then, you got a whole lot more bang for your buck when you bought an airplane ticket. Back when I was in middle school, when you bought an airplane ticket, you got, I know you may not, some of you younger folks may not believe me, but back then, when you bought your just coach standard airline ticket, it came with a meal. You got a meal on that thing, and I mean, all the beverages you wanted, and they didn't charge you for a checked bag. I mean, you brought your bag, and whatever you brought, they threw it up there, they threw it under the plane, and it flew with you. Today, that's not so true, is it, right? If you've flown recently, you know that you get a bottle of water and a cookie. That's it. Hope that flight, that 16-hour flight to Tokyo that I took a few years ago, hope that cookie makes it, man. It's like, nah, cookie ain't gonna make it. Cookie won't get me from Atlanta to Arizona anymore. I mean, like a bottle of water and a cookie isn't gonna do it. And not only that, but now if you have a bag bigger than a backpack, they charge you for that. You know, they got that little thing out there when you walk up, you got to put your bag in it, and they make sure it fits, it's the right carry-on size, and if it won't fit in that little deal, then they charge you for it, and of course we know that the charges are pretty significant. Now, I know airlines, how many of you have ever lost a bag on an airline before? How many of you, let me get another show of hands here. How many of you take a carry-on bag and you do whatever you got to do to just jam stuff in that thing because I ain't paying the fee? Yeah. I mean, that thing, right? I mean, it's busting at the seams. You figure out, you watch YouTube videos on how to vacuum seal and roll your clothes so that they all fit so that you don't have to pay that fee. But some of us, occasionally, my friend Ryan over here actually taught me this trick. You take your carry-on, and then, when they get there, you get to the gate like, hey, can y'all check this for me? And then they put it on, and you don't have to deal with it walking through the airport. But they lose luggage, don't they? How many of you, again, real quick, how many of you ever had your luggage lost on an airplane? Okay, it's pretty good, significant number. I'm amazed, though, at how they handle luggage. I'm amazed that you check your bag at the gate and somebody takes it from you and you don't see it again until you get to where you're going, and you may change planes once or twice on your way to your final destination. The mind-boggling system that they have created to handle baggage, to pass it. I mean, think about this now. They pass it from person to person, and then that thing rolls down some kind of a beltway. Somebody pulls it off of a belt. They put it on a vehicle. And there's not just one vehicle. There's numerous vehicles, these baggage carts that they put them on. And then they drive them. And then there's how many hundreds of planes especially if you go to Hartsfield, right? I mean, there's just hundreds and hundreds of planes. And they make their way to the right plane. They get on. And then almost miraculously, you arrive at your final destination, you go to baggage claim, you wait for that little light to go off, and then the belt starts running, and it just spits your luggage out, and you grab that thing, and you go on about your merry way. In reality, that seems like a very simple thing. But I want to just read you a few statistics about the Atlanta airport, okay? Let me give you some numbers to think about. At the Atlanta airport, it averages 275,000 passengers and 2,700 arrival and departures a day. Now think about that. That's a 24-hour period, and as we know, really it's about an 18-hour period because flights don't really take off and land after midnight. So 275,000 passengers, 2,700 arrivals and departures a day, and as many as 80 to 100,000 checked bags a day. Now, I did some math because that's a lot, right? That's a big number. So I did some math just to kind of break it down into some bite-sized pieces. That would be over 5,000 bags an hour and 90 bags per minute. And think about that. They're handling 90 bags per minute, and somehow your bag ends up where you arrive miraculously, right? I mean, it's just incredible. And the reason it does, the reason it ends up where it's supposed to go is when you check your bag, they put this tag on it. And when they put the tag on it, that tag has 3 little letters. That is the airport code. Anybody know the airport code to Atlanta? Yeah, y'all got to get that one, man. Like, y'all ain't from Georgia. You're lying about being from Georgia if you don't know that one. Like, there's I think it's JAX is Jacksonville. I know PHX is Phoenix. LAX is obviously LA. Other than that, I don't really know a whole lot of the other airport codes, but they stick a tag on there, and 3 little letters determine where that bag ends up in life. Don't you just wish that in life just came with a tag? That you just always knew where it was you were supposed to go. That you always knew at every change of a lane, at every fork in a road, that you could just look at your tag and go, oh, that's where I'm going. I mean, it would be great if life were that simple. So again, here's the question that we're dealing with today. Where are you going? I mean, it'd be fantastic if when you were pondering the questions that often approach us in life, hey, where am I going to go to school? That's a reality for a lot of college or high school students getting ready to graduate, or the ones that just graduated. Where should I go to school? What should I study? Wouldn't it be great if you could just look down and go, hey, what's my tag, right? God, what's my tag? What is the tag that I have? Where am I headed to, God? Where do you have me going in this life? Because God said he knew the plans that he had for you and me, right? I mean, he tells that to Jeremiah in the Old Testament, but we also know that the promises that God makes to the people in the Old Testament are true today because, again, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if God knows the plans that he had for Jeremiah, of course he knows the plans that he has for you and me. And wouldn't it be great if just when we were born, God said, hey, I'm going to slap a tag on you, and that tag is going to help you know where you're to go? Wouldn't it be great if when it came to a job offer, that you get a job? How many of y'all have ever had one of those, right? You have a good job, but you get a job offer, and now you're going, okay, God, well, what do I do? Do I stay where I'm at, or is this an open door, or is this a distraction? Is this where I'm supposed to be, where I'm at currently, or am I supposed to take this job? Wouldn't it be great if God just gave us a tag that said, hey, this is where you were supposed to end up? How do I respond to the question that comes? Because oftentimes we get solicited questions in life that we have to answer, and they're not just easy answers. It's not a black and white deal. It's not simple. I mean, how great would it be if God gave us a tag? Make no mistake about it, you are headed somewhere. In your life, wherever you are on a path, you are headed to a destination. You may not have it all figured out, you may not have it all planned out, but regardless of whether you do, you and I, we are headed to a place. We are on a course and we are headed in a direction. So here's the question, so how can we get to where we want to be when we don't know where we're going? How do we get to where we want to be if we don't know where we're going? I mean, I asked the question kind of setting it up earlier, where are you going? And many of you would be like, well, in a few minutes I'm going to eat. Tomorrow I'm going to work. But where are you going? Where are you going to be 5 years from now? Where are you going to be a year from now? Where are you going? Because again, every one of us, we're headed to a destination. You are headed in a direction. You are on a path that ultimately leads to somewhere. So where are you going? See, some people get to where they're going by accident. A lot of times when we get to those places that we're going by accident, those places usually aren't very fun. But when we can plan, if we can ever pull back for a minute and think about where we're going, just like you plan your vacation. I mean, my wife, she plans our vacations out 5 years ahead of time. She knows where we're going 5 years from now. I'm just telling you, she plans. It's like I ask her sometimes, babe, do you only think about vacations? And that's okay. That's okay. Because then that means that's something that I don't have to plan. Some people know where they're going in life, and then other people just go, hey, I don't know, I'm just going to live day by day and figure this thing out. And in some ways, that's not so bad. But what about when it comes to our spiritual journey? Do we ever consider, I mean, we always set goals, right? We set like physical health goals. We set working out goals. We may set work goals. We set all kinds of goals. We even set goals for our kids. Like when our kids come along, we go, okay, we got goals. Here's the grades you're going to make. If you don't make these grades, then guess what? There are consequences that come. I still love you the same, but you will not have that Xbox. You will not have that phone. You will not have. So we start pulling that. We have plans for our kids, but how many of us, with the most important thing about our life, our spiritual journey, how many of us have a plan? Where are we going? Where are you going? And how do we know which choices to make, and how do we know what direction to go when we don't know where it is that we're going? Well, the good news for us is that we're not the only person, or we're not the only people in history to not know the answer to those questions. As a matter of fact, the Bible actually gives us an example of someone who is told to go somewhere, and he actually doesn't know where he's going. If you would, Genesis 12, that's where we're going to be. If you have your Bibles, you can look there, turn in your Bibles to the Bible app, or you can just read the verses on the screen and listen to what it says. Now, I want you to think for a minute. Now, Abram that we're about to read about, which is Abraham, he hadn't had his name changed yet. Abram is 75 years old when all this goes down. And I want you to think about, if you're in Abram's shoes and you hear what we're about to read, I want you to think about the emotional anxiety in you that you might feel. And you might not. You might go, hey, you know what? I'm good with that. That's easy for me. But listen to what God says to Abram. Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. Anybody got a problem with that? I do. I'm like, God, could you, I know you've had all this planned out. Could you share with me just a little bit, more? I don't know about you, but as I start thinking about the conversation that I would probably be having, I mean, if God just kind of spoke, could you imagine if God spoke audibly to you today? And he said, hey, and you're fill in the blank with your name. Hey, I have something for you. And we're good. You're like, right, we've sang the songs, we've heard here am I, God, send me, right? We're quick to volunteer. Yes, God, whatever you ask of me, count me in. Here I am, send me. And then God says, great, I'm glad that's your response. That is fantastic. I love your faith. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to pack up all of your belongings. I want you to go home. I want you to pack your house up. And then what I want you to do is, then I want you to load up your family. After you and your family have all your stuff packed into your U-Haul or whatever it is that you're going to put it in, I want you to load all of your family up in your vehicle, and I want you to leave all your other family. Now, for some of you, that might excite you, leaving all your other family. But he's saying, I want you to pack everything up. I want you to get your wife, your kids. I want you to load up, and I want you to leave your friends, your job. I want you to leave everything in your life that's familiar. Now that creates some tension, right? Maybe some of you may be more willing than I might be to not follow up with another question. But I can imagine that if it's me, I'm probably going, God, can I call a timeout for just a second? Can we put a pause on whatever it is that you're going to say after this point? I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm sure I can do that. I mean, I'm not sure I can do that, God. As I think about it, God, I'm not so sure I can do that because my kids, they're in a school that they just love. They've got so many good friends, and I mean, their teachers love them, and they love their teachers, and they're going to be on the ball team next year, and I mean, he's been promised like a starting position on whatever, and God, I just don't know if me just packing everything up right now and moving is really a good idea. And I mean, what if I can't find another job wherever I'm going? What if there's no employment available? And God, you've seen gas prices, right? I mean, I don't know if I can afford to drive wherever it is. I can't just afford to be driving around, God, and not have a place that I'm supposed to be going. How am I supposed to figure out a budget? And so, God, I just don't know if I can do that. And then God says, well, I wasn't finished. And in that moment, you begin to think, oh, well, that gives me a little bit of comfort. Maybe he's going to offer something more concrete on the other end. And God's response is, in that moment, I want you to just go. Great. Go where? I'll show you. I just want you to go. Does that not cause any of you? I mean, sometimes I think we read the Bible and we read it and we go, oh, well, this is just kind of a story. This didn't happen to a real person. No, Abram was a real person. And this really happened. Hey, just pack your stuff up, leave everything that you know, and just go. He didn't give Abraham a whole lot to go on. Now, we think to ourselves, well, that doesn't make much sense. I mean, God would never ask me to do that. You ever told yourself that? God would never ask me to do anything like that. It's just silliness. That's crazy. It's ludicrous. God, you wouldn't ask me to do that because you're a God of order and that sounds like chaos. We can reason with ourselves all day long. And to be honest with you, when that starts to happen, when you kind of feel that little nudge inside of you of God going, hey, I want you to serve at VBS. And you're like, God, I don't even like kids. God, I've already done my part. I've already raised mine. I got them through I babysat them when they were in the nursery. I was taught them when they were in the kids ministry. I went and did lock-ins and sleepovers when I was in student ministry. I even went to camp with them. God, I'm done. Those days are in the rear view. And God says, no, here's what I want. We begin to make excuses to God as to why, God, I can't do that because that just doesn't make sense. And here's the reality. When God gives you that little nudge to do something, that's a pathway, right? That's a path that God wants you to travel because there's a destination He's trying to get you to. And so He's trying to illuminate this walkway for you so that you can begin to see. Now, you may not see the long destination, right? We know this, right? God, your word is a lamp unto my feet, right? It's not a flashlight. It's not one of those big whatever spotlight things that you can see miles and miles and miles. He said, your word is a lamp to my feet. I'm going to show you your next step. And as you take a step, it will illuminate then your next step. God, it would be great if you could just show us the whole way, but He doesn't do that. He says, hey, I just want you to start going. Just start going. That's what He tells Abram. And when we push back against that, when we begin to question it, do you know what we're really doing? This is all part of our sin nature. Our sin nature is what makes us do this. Sin is what simultaneously makes us foolish. Because how many of us have done something that we knew we shouldn't do, and then we did it, and we said, we're just so stupid. We fell for it again, right? We've all done that. That's our sin nature. So our sin nature simultaneously makes us foolish, and yet at the same time makes us think that we're smarter than God. It's amazing how that happens. Matter of fact, there's a guy that I like to read his stuff. His name is Paul David Tripp, and here's what he wrote about this issue. I just want to read this to you. He says, while we name ourselves as wise, we look at things that God does or things that He calls us to do as utterly foolish. How many people have said, how could you ever worship a God who would fill in the blank? Or, how many people have wondered if God really loved me, why would He? How many people have asked this question, is blank really that bad? How many people have said, I don't see what's so wrong with a little fill in the blank? See, we read the Word of God, and this is what the point that Paul David Tripp is making. He says we really do have the ability to convince ourselves that we know what's best, and we really don't need wisdom greater than our own. He goes on to say that I am convinced that most of us do this far more than we think. We minimize the danger of what God calls dangerous. We question the need for the boundaries that God has set for us. And in the face of our own sin, we argue that it's not so bad after all. Every day, in some situation or relationship, we are tempted to think that we are smarter than God. And we do, don't we? So here's what we do. How does this play out? Not to ruin your Memorial Day weekend, but sometimes we can do this through eating things that we know we shouldn't eat. When we know the empirical evidence is foolish. We spend ourselves into hopeless debt. We go out, we buy stuff that we don't need. Do not elbow your wife right now. We spend money on things that we don't need. But while we know that in doing this, it actually hinders our ability to be where we want to be financially at the end of the month and at the end of our career. We live selfishly and judgmentally in relationships and then wonder why there's so much tension that exists between us, right? Like we know that we shouldn't talk about people. We know that we shouldn't gossip. We know that we shouldn't jump into Facebook arguments, but they're so tempting. You see somebody post something and you're like, oh, I know better, right? And then there's that temptation to want to jump in when you just need to put your phone down. You need to put your phone down, let it go, walk away. Somebody once said, you should type out what you want to say and then delete it. I would be very tempted after I typed out what I said to go, that is good, send, right? But we know no one ever wins in that situation. Like, we know these things, but we think that we are smarter than God. That's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1:25, he says, for the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. It's like Paul is saying, if it were possible for God to be foolish, his foolishness, his most foolish moment would be better than our wisest. And that's the picture. So, where you're tempted to tell yourself that, where are you tempted to tell yourself that you are wiser than God? Where do you argue that your path for you is better than his path for you? Where do you lay out the logic to yourself that makes sense to step over boundaries that you know on the other side of that boundary, it may seem like fun, but there's also danger over there. There is disaster that is waiting for you. Where are those places in your life? We have to begin to identify those. If we're ever going to be on the path that God wants us, what do you call wise that God says is foolish, or foolish that God says is wise? And I ask that because most of us would look at the scenario that played out in Abram's life, and we would say, that's foolish. Like no one would ever pack their bags and grab their family and move away for no reason and just start going without knowing where they're supposed to go. We would say that's foolish. Now, in our Sunday morning spirituality, as we sit here, we would go, oh, well, if God spoke to me, then I would. But doesn't he speak to us all the time? He speaks to us through his word. He speaks to me sometimes through the Holy Spirit. He gives me these nudges. Don't do that. Hey, here's what I need you to do. This is what I want you to do. And he gives us these nudges, but then we think, God, I'm smart enough. I can handle this. And what do? We step into things and places that we shouldn't be. And then we ultimately end up places that we don't want to be. So let me ask you a question. Where are you going? Where are you going? Maybe a better way to frame that would be, where are you headed? What direction are you moving in? What's the direction of your life? Is it towards God? Is it just randomly floating and drifting? Is it running away from God? I mean, where are you currently headed? And I again, every decision is a path that leads to somewhere. And here's the thing, that we look at the story of Abram, and when we read that, we go, well, God just said to Abram, he didn't tell him where to go. He didn't give him a destination. Following God is not a destination, but it is a pathway that does lead to destinations. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it's not so much the destination that's so great as much as it is the journey. I mean, the Emersons in our family, we have vacationed together numerous times, and we have gotten on roads and we had no idea where we were going to end up. I mean, we have been some places, and it's amazing that on the journey to a place that we thought was going to be the most fantastic thing ever, we discover these little nooks and places that really were maybe the best part of the trip. It's the journey that's so satisfying. But every decision is you taking a step, is me taking a step onto a path, and it ultimately leads to a destination. So God is saying, hey, I just want you to go. In other words, here's what God's saying. Not just go, I want you to follow me. Because when you follow me, that is a destination. It's a pathway that leads to a destination. Jesus would say it this way in Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14. Jesus said, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the what? The way is easy. So that's a path, right? Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is easy that what? Leads to destruction. What's he talking about? Jesus is talking about, I want you to follow me. I want you to follow my teaching. I want you to follow what I'm telling you to do, because if you do, it's good. But if not, if you don't follow my way, it's a wide gate, its way is easy, and it leads to destruction. and those who enter by it are many. Verse 14, for the gate is narrow, and the what? Way, the pathway, the path that you're on, the way is hard that leads to life. And there are those who find it are few. So following God is a pathway that does lead to a destination. He says one destination is destruction and one destination is life. And which one of those two you arrive at depends on the decisions that you make. Are you going to follow me? Again, God doesn't give Abram a decision or a destination. He just asks him to make a decision. God did not tell Abraham where he was going. He just told him to go. Again, or maybe a better way is just to say, follow me. And here's the thing that we need to realize. We're going to put this on the screen for you. Obedience to God always arises out of trust. It should be an of in there. My fault on the typo. Obedience to God always arises out of trust in God. Your obedience to God is going to arise out of, or it's going to fall out of your trust in God. How much do you trust God with your future? How much do you trust God with the direction of your life? Because it's our obedience to God always arises out of our trust in God. In the next two verses is where we're going to find our tag, okay? So I want you to see if you can figure it out. This is a tag that God is going to give Abram, which is a tag that I hope that you and I can use for the rest of our life here today as we think about packing our bags. Every time you pack a bag this summer to go somewhere, I want you to think about, make the connections to what God taught us through this series. So in these next few verses is the tag. Let's see if you can pick it up. Verses 2 and 3, here we go. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. Verse 3, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Did you see the tag? Did you pick up on it? It's three letters, just like we would have in our own luggage. It's a tag that helps us connect sort of to a destination. Let's read this again and see if you can see it now. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. Verse 3, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. The tag is and. What do I mean by that? How does that apply to a destination? What does that mean? And when we think about PHX and ATL and LAX and all these letters, they kind of tell us where we're going. They kind of tell us that this is the ultimate goal for us. How does the word and in this apply to us? Without those three letters, the promise of God is separated from the command of God. Okay, so if I just went back and read verse 1, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. That's a command. God says, hey, here's a command. And again, on the surface, it's not understandable. It doesn't sound like something that would be very smart to do. It doesn't sound like a good thing to do. But then those three letters come in that kind of help give us a little more comfort. Like if I'm getting on a plane, I want to know what the three letters on my bag are. I want to know where I'm going. Now, he doesn't, again, give a destination, but he does give a path. So if God says, hey, here's the path, I'm okay with that. I don't have to know where it ends up. I just have to trust God and the path that he gives me and the path that he puts me on to deliver me into something. And what is the something that God gives? Look, without the promises of God, the commands of God can seem purposeless. Okay, so God, this sounds really hard. I'm not saying they are purposeless. Do not hear what I'm not saying, okay? I'm not saying that the commands of God are purposeless. But without the promises of God, the commands of God can seem purposeless. Like, God, okay, you want me to just pack up and go somewhere. If God left it there, never said another word to Abram, it's just like, okay, what's the purpose in this, God? Like, why do you want me to do this? This sounds like torture. It doesn't sound like something that is going to ultimately end up for my good. So what's the purpose in this? And this is where those three letters come in, and so this and ties the promises of God to the commands of God. So without the promises of God, the commands of God can seem purposeless, but without the commands of God, these two work hand in hand. Without the commands of God, the promises of God have no pathway. So yes, God has promises. Great. Great. You have a land for me that's going to be a huge inheritance. That's amazing. How do I get there? Without the commands of God saying, Abram, go, pack all your stuff up. Don't leave anything behind. I want you all your belongings packed up. I want your family in the U-Haul, and you guys just go. Without the commands, there's no pathway for the promises of God. And God gives him a lot of promises. Look at verse 4, and we'll wrap up. In verse 4, it says, so Abram went as the Lord had told him. And that's just where we're going to end it. That's the first half of verse 4. I know there's more to it. So Abram went as the Lord told him. You know, we rarely travel paths that we don't trust. I don't know about you, but kind of got spoiled lately. I mean, with Siri and all these things that they put in your car and in your phone. This is going to sound really bad, but I usually don't make trips to Tifton without Siri being on for some reason. It's even conditioned my kids. Like Asher, when he's in the back seat, he'll be like, Dad, can you turn the map on and then back it out, zoom it out so I can see where we're going? I mean, he wants to see the red dot. He wants to see the end. Isn't that you and me? Like, we want to know, God, where are you taking us? And unfortunately, what God gives us usually is that zoomed in view where we can kind of see the road and maybe a couple of roads up ahead, but we don't really see the end destination. And that's where the trust in God comes in. And Abram fully trusted God, and so he went. So what comes of Abram and his following God? Well, there was this little nation called Israel. And out of Israel came a Messiah. His name was Jesus. And Jesus is the one who died on the cross to save us from our sins. All because one day God gave a command tied to a promise by 3 little letters. So let me ask you a question. What commands of God have you been trying to outsmart God on, avoiding the command that has potentially led to you missing out on getting to the promises that God has for you? See, maybe what God is telling you is, hey, I want you to serve in this area of the church, and when you do, I'm going to raise up from underneath your teaching a future Billy Graham, a future president of the United States, you are going to be raising up a future husband or wife. You're going to be raising up someone who could potentially impact the campuses at the schools they go to. You may be raising up the next superintendent of schools. You may be raising up the next governor. You have no idea. God says, hey, you serve me, you follow me, and I will use everything that you do. But without those 3 letters, the commands of God seem kind of purposeless. Without those 3 letters, the promises of God have no direction. What's God directing you to do? Where do you feel God leading you? And if you haven't figured that out, maybe today it's time for you to pull back. Maybe you have the rest of this afternoon and evening. Maybe you have a day off tomorrow where you can sit back and go, God, hey, where are we going? So that God can illuminate a pathway for you. So that ultimately your obedience to His command would become tied to His promises so that you can begin to experience the things that God created you for. See, God knows the plans that He has for you and me. We don't know. But how we find them out is real simple. Follow Him. Follow Him. You follow Jesus and you watch where your life takes you. Every great friendship I have today, following Jesus, those 2 people right there, best friends in life. Met them following Jesus. We didn't know each other before, 2012, 13, somewhere in there. We didn't know each other. Now we vacation together. They travel up to Georgia and fight the gnats to see their friends. We go down there. We go to Haiti with them. I mean, look, best people in life you'll ever meet, following Jesus. I wouldn't be here today talking to you if I didn't follow Jesus one day. And by the way, my plan was, or my path was, hey, go teach this Sunday school class. Like, God, I just got saved. I can't teach them. Go. It didn't make sense. But through teaching led to opportunity. Opportunity led to a call that I could hear now because God's in my ear. What about you? What's on the other side of the and for you? God's given a command, and there is a promise. But you'll never find that promise apart from following what he's called you to do.